NFL free agency day 2. So today was an important day, but still not necessarily a day that a lot of crazy stuff happened, obviously, and not a lot of big free agent signing, but some really important ones. So again, team by team, we're gonna go through it and tell you if that's something you should care about, is something you really shouldn't. So nothing new for the Cardinals. Ravens, they re-signed Tyus Bowser. That number way too big. 4 years, 22 million now. But Tyus Bowser, high effort player, and he does a okay to decent in their scheme. You're still talking about a guy who can't rush the passer independently, and even as a run defender is just okay. And for them to pay him that much, it's just frankly bad. Although he will be useful and he'll make plays this year. It's going to be things that a lot of other players can do in his place, and there are going to be other guys that sign for lesser contracts or just better. Didn't go Autry made one sign yesterday. Carolina, nothing new. Buffalo. So I was going to criticize them pretty significantly about the John Brown release. John Brown's still a really, really good receiver, maybe the best free agent available at this point. And I thought they were making a huge mistake until they signed today Emmanuel Sanders. And I really like that from the Bills because it shows that they understand the actual reason they were good. Now, Josh Allen did get better, but he didn't get that much better as an individual player. I actually think he was decent before. People criticized him way too much in his earlier years. But what made him so good last year was because in that offense, he had four receivers who were elite at creating separation and getting open constantly. And I mean constantly. Stephon Diggs, best or second best receiver in the NFL for sure with Devontae Adams, no question. And then Gabriel Davis, rookie, was really good right away. John Brown was really, really good, and Cole Beasley was really, really good. Now, you lose one of those, and they would have taken a hit, especially with any level of injury. But with Emmanuel Sanders added in, I mean, we're talking about a player who's frankly really similar to John Brown. Now, he does lack, especially at this age, the deep threat ability. But John Brown was good in a lot of other ways, and that's what Emmanuel Sanders is still good at. Underutilized on the Saints last year, still scored a ton of touchdowns. This is excellent from the Bills. Excellent. Then we got the Bears. So, first, real quick, re-signed Jermaine Ifedi. Whatever, not a disaster at guard for them, actually, but not someone I necessarily care for as a full-time starter. Andy Dalton. They let Mitch Trubisky go, and they spring in Andy Dalton. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. As a primarily Jaguars fan, but also a Vikings fan, I was worried about the Russell Wilson trade rumors of the Bears. This, maybe not so much. Andy Dalton, I do think is better than what he showed last year. I actually think he was okay last year, but the reason a lot of stats and obviously winning didn't come for him was because of the state of that Cowboys team. I mean, they had a horrible, horrible defense, plus injuries, and we're talking about 5, 6 backups that he was rotating through on the offensive line. So I'm not necessarily going to blame him too much. Now, he's not an elite guy. He's not necessarily going to make them a lot better. Now, he'll make them a lot better than Trubisky, but is he going to be that much different than when they had Nick Foles in? I wouldn't necessarily expect that to be the case, although I do think drive to drive, you can expect more consistently good results, but I don't hate him as a quarterback. I think the Bears still have a chance to make the playoffs, but no better than that, which is kind of the issue that they face with their current roster. Bengals. So, I don't know if I want to start with the good or the bad, so I'll get the good ones out of the way. Mike Hilton, maybe the best slot corner in the NFL. Excellent player, really, really good. An elite run defender, even at his size, and as a coverage guy, he legitimately matters in a positive way. And 4 years, 24 million, I love that. That's great for the Bengals. Chidobe Awuzie, 3 years, 21.75 million. That is a little heavy on the price, but I actually think Awuzie didn't even really contribute to the problems in Dallas last year or the last couple of years. He was fine. He can consistently not get burned, which is, that's maybe the most valuable skill as a non-elite player you can have. Not maybe, it absolutely is. And he provides that, and he can provide that consistently. He does have issues with the best receivers, and if he's the number one on your team, which, he might be on the Bengals next year, that's not necessarily good. But as just an individual player, I do like him, and that price isn't the worst thing I've ever seen. But what is Trey Hendrickson. Bengals are going to be disappointed by this contract pretty severely. 4 years, $60 million. It's fucking bonkers. Trey Hendrickson is a decent to good run defender who plays the edge pretty strong and can win lightly with his hands against worse tackles. And that's the extent of his abilities. I mean, the vast majority of his sacks pressures last year were created by specifically David Onyemata, but just the Saints' defensive front in general, playing opposite Cam Jordan. And while I don't hate Trey Hendrickson, the player, I don't think he's necessarily bad as a pass rusher. The way that some other guys, even that get paid, are. He's not good. And if the Bengals expect, I mean, at that price, you're expecting double-digit sacks a year, and without an elite defensive front around him, Trey Hendrickson's not even going to touch that. They're going to be disappointing. Like I said, I do actually think he's a reasonable player. He's a useful player for sure. That price is terrible, though. Terrible. Browns, so they signed Takk McKinley today. I'm okay with that. Takk McKinley actually has shown when he's been on the field as a decent speed rusher, which is not that common of a skill set, and actually is useful against some tackles around the NFL. Now, I don't love him as a every down player or really as a developmental guy. I don't think he necessarily has a lot of ceiling to get better in the areas that he's not good at right now. I'd really doubt it. But what he does provide, if he stays healthy and mentally right, actually as a rotational guy is not bad. It's really not bad, especially opposite Myles Garrett and with Sheldon Richardson and Jordan Elliott, the way that they can pressure on the interior, pushing guys back into Takk McKinley, bending the edge. I don't hate that at all. The Cowboys, they signed Ty Nsekhe, actually a good backup tackle. Now, they already had good backup tackles if they're healthy this year. And Terence Steele, well, good is a little strong, survivable backup tackles in Terence Steele and Brandon Knight. Ty Nsekhe is basically that plus plus, which I'm never going to complain about them signing a good player, especially at the price. So whatever, but I just will note that that's not necessarily their biggest need, but it's fine. Tackle's always good to have a lot of. The Broncos, nothing new. The Lions, nothing new. The Houston Texans. All right, Terence Mitchell, 2 years, $7.5 million. I actually love that. Terence Mitchell played well for the Browns last year. Like, well, he legitimately is a good coverage player. He's an elite, and again, he's a player. If he's your number one, that's not good. But he would have been miles better. Is miles better than any corner they had on roster that played for them the entirety of last year, outside of maybe Garyon Conley. And at that price point, yeah, that's great. That's a really really good signing. Kevin Pierre-Louis, that is not good. 2 years, $7 million. Kevin Pierre-Louis, he got benched for a reason last year on the football team. He is in theory, he's a coverage linebacker who can get sideline to sideline. In practice, he's a coverage linebacker who gets burned every play of every game and doesn't make plays as a run defender. That's bad, but um, you know, you're not going to be shoot 100% these NFL teams. They signed Derek Rivers as well, 1 year, $3 million. That's fine. Derek Rivers is he's a fine NFL player. He belongs on an NFL field. Doesn't necessarily do anything above and beyond, or doesn't do anything above and beyond. But if he is just a cog in your machine, you're going to be all right. And at that price, yeah, that's all you're expecting. So I'm not going to roast that. Also, Tyrod Taylor signed to be their backup. If they keep Deshaun Watson, that makes a ton of sense. Tyrod Taylor, a really good backup quarterback. And if he comes into play, if you're on a good roster, you're fine. Now, Texans have a garbage roster with not basically no positions that are above average outside of receiver and quarterback. So I don't expect that. But again, backup quarterback, whatever, it's fine. Jacksonville Jaguars. So I said I'm a Jags fan, and this is tough. This is really what I was hoping not to see. So there was one that I forgot to cover yesterday for them, which was the Rayshawn Jenkins signing. I actually think that's okay. It's 4 years, $35 million is a bit much, but we're talking about the team with the worst safeties in the NFL last year, who is now going to get a player who will pretty much guaranteed provide baseline average safety play, which is again, if you take a position from horrible to average, that's pretty valuable. It's maybe not 4 years, $35 million valuable, but that's fine. Marvin Jones, 2 years, $14.5 million. Marvin Jones is just a fine receiver. He is pretty notably useful in a couple ways. Those ways happen to be really accentuated by Matthew Stafford in Detroit, and we'll see how Trevor Lawrence translates to the NFL, but I don't necessarily expect him to be as good. But he is still a player who can dominate a certain type of corner, which exists in this division, namely like Rock Ya-Sin, and he's going to be useful for them for sure. So I'm not going to roast that too much. The one I will roast endlessly probably is Shaquille Griffin. What the fuck? So Shaquille Griffin is just a mediocre player, basically at best. I mean, he's another one of these guys where he's a athletic press corner who you're going to throw up against big body receivers and not get worried about being burned too bad. But in practice, He can't guard those guys, and he has no lateral agility whatsoever, so he can't guard fast receivers. And so all you're doing is putting a guy out there who can cover mediocre, big-bodied receivers. Okay, that is not a valuable skill set. That is definitely not in the double-digit millions valuable skill set per year. That is a horrible signing, especially when they have a player who's basically identical and probably better on the roster than Sidney Jones. This was a huge mistake from them, especially between those two. C.J. Henderson, one of them, if you put one of them in the slot, that's an absolute disaster too. I mean, that's just a really, really bad signing, really, really bad. And Jags are gonna be disappointed real quick in that one. Also signed Chris Maynard, year $6.65 million. I don't know. Chris Maynard is actually a reasonable blocker, and even as a receiver, he's not a disaster the way some of these like backup tight ends are. Think like Josh Hill on the Saints, where he just literally adds nothing. Chris Maynard's actually can do some little things okay as a receiver. I don't necessarily care about him or anything like that. I mean, he doesn't change the level of their team, but actually he's a reasonable NFL player. Anytime you're signing a reasonable NFL player, again, especially at that price, it's fine. And the Jags re-signed Sidney Jones. That's good. Sidney Jones did play well and can actually cover some of those big receivers as opposed to his new teammate. God, so bad. The Chiefs re-signed Taco Charlton. That's good. Taco Charlton, actually a reasonable rusher. He can win with his hands, even at this age. And as a disappointment, first-round pick, him actually doing similar to Ty McKinley, where if you never expect anything beyond 10 snaps pass rushing a game, you're not going to be disappointed because they're actually going to provide something. And I don't think the Chiefs are expecting more than that. Chargers, nothing new. Rams, nothing new. Raiders, nothing new. Miami Dolphins. So they signed Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett's just kind of bad. Now, he's presumably going to be their backup, of course, to Tua. And at that point, if you're signing a backup quarterback, Jacoby Brissett, you can do worse than, but you can also do better at this point. And I don't know, Jacoby Brissett, just you're not going to win very many games unless you have an elite roster around him. You're actually going to win like no games. The Minnesota Vikings. Now, listen, the Vikings have a chance, and I talked about this going into the offseason, to be a really elite team next year. Their defense was already actually pretty good last year. They were hamstrung by the worst probably position group in the entire NFL, being their interior defensive line. And once Danielle Hunter got hurt, their just defensive line in general was so bad that the rest of their defense was just completely unfunctional. But what happens when you take, again, because the rest of their defense is pretty good. Their rookie corners absolutely worked out. Jeff Gladney, especially Cam Dantzler, already really good. They have other guys that can play at that spot, like Chris Boyd. Their corners were not the problem last year. Their safety is still really good if they bring Anthony Harris back. Between him and Harrison Smith, best safeties in the NFL. Their linebackers, if they're healthy, Eric Hendricks, Anthony Barr. I mean, I'm telling you, if their defensive line goes from the literal worst position group in the NFL to an above-average unit to potentially elite if Danielle Hunter comes back and is fully healthy, they're gonna go. They're gonna get really good really quick. And they did the first part. They did the first steps of that. They signed Donald Thompson today. 2 years, $22 million. Now, is that a little hefty? I guess, but Donald Thompson is a legitimately good player. Legitimately matters, especially as a run defender. And when you put him next to Danielle Hunter and Michael Pierce coming back from his COVID opt-out, you're going from a team who's got blown off the ball every play to a team who's literally never going to get blown off the ball. And that's nuts. Really, really good for them. They also signed Nick Vigil. That one's trash. Nick Vigil's not an NFL player. But 1 year, 1.75. They're probably signing him as a special teamer at that point. That's fine. The Patriots. Anything new today? No. I did probably a little bit tuckered out from yesterday. New Orleans Saints. They signed Alex Parma, fullback. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the team. He's just kind of a whatever fullback. Doesn't really do anything, add anything to your team. Giants signed John Ross. I missed that one when I was looking earlier. I actually think John Ross is still pretty good. If a smarter team used him, they could use him decent. Well, pretty good is a little strong, but his speed, I mean, there's no difference between him and Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, people think is good. And, yeah, John Ross can play in the NFL field with a smart team, no problem. We'll see if that's the Giants or not, probably not, but I like the flyer. New York Jets, Corey Davis. I believe I talked about this yesterday, but I'm not positive, so I'm just going to mention again real quick. That's too much for him. Corey Davis operates. Yeah, I did talk about him yesterday, actually. So if you want that, check out the video yesterday. Because I remember I was going to compare him to a tight end, and I definitely did that. already. The Pittsburgh Steelers re-signed Cam Sutton. I definitely like that. 2 years, $9 million. That's not bad for a corner who can reasonably start games and not get burned for you. Seahawks signed Kelly Witherspoon. That is bad. Kelly Witherspoon does not belong in an NFL field. He will get burned by every type of receiver constantly over and over again. Really bad. And the Seahawks are going to ask him to do things like they asked Shaquille Griffin and Trey Flowers and their other Marquise Blair, their other like big body outside corners to do, and he's not going to be able to do them, and he's going to get benched. I would bet very early if he even plays at all. 49ers, nothing new. The Buccaneers, nothing new. Tennessee. So first they signed Janoris Jenkins. I do like that. Janoris Jenkins is still a reasonable player. We'll see if his age catches up to him this year, but all the way up until this last year, as he's been on the Saints, he actually is reasonably pretty good. But the details for the Bud Dupree contract came out. And while I talked yesterday how I thought Bud Dupree is actually a reasonable player and why I don't like what the Titans are going with their edge position, being that they need edge rush and they're not adding it at all between him and Denico Autry. That was before I knew the price. 5 years, $82 million. Horrible. That's worse than the Trey Hendrickson one. Because frankly, they're fairly similar players, and you're paying that much for a edge pass rusher who doesn't add edge pass rushing. That's not good. Bud Dupree, I mean, okay, listen, they both can win very occasionally, especially against bad tackles, which is not nothing. Not every edge rusher in the NFL can do that. Look at the Titans last year, but if you're paying that much for guys who aren't in the elite tier and just aren't even in a tier that really matters as far as I'm an offense and I'm worried about who's rushing the passer, that's really, really bad. So, yeah, that was really, really bad. So, from the Titans, well, I thought they made some other okay ones, especially Denico Autry. Way too much money. They went fucking nuts for that. Washington football team, the last one here. Signed Ryan Fitzpatrick to potentially be their starter next year, which I think is fine. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, looked good last year in part because when they ran him at quarterback, the Dolphins actually transformed their dumbass offense into a decent offense. Now, was that their offense was good and Tua is that bad? I'm not positive, but Ryan Fitzpatrick's not really a YOLO guy anymore. Hasn't been for a little bit, and I don't mind him here. Is he good necessarily? No, and I think Taylor Heinicke showed to me pretty clearly last year he's just better, is worth a shot at this point. But I'm not going to hate that signing. Like your $10 million for a potential starter quarterback, that's not bad at all. But yeah, overall today, some real bad ones, but especially in the secondary outside of the fucking Shaquille Griffin one, decent ones. Forgot to mention too with the football team actually because it's not listed here. Came to agreement with William Jackson III. That's a good sign. William Jackson III is actually a good corner, and I believe it's for less money than Shaquille Griffin one. If you can't tell, I'm salty about that. William Jackson III, actually a good player, actually a good corner, who legitimately matters, he can cover people. So I'll mention that too. But yeah, that's all for today. And nothing crazy, but definitely some interesting ones, and some